technically, the title of today's message is How to Use It. And over the past three previous weeks, we've talked about what it is and what it does and the way that it works. It being spirit, how it works through us, the creative power of thought being the mechanism, and of course, all of life being the infinite set of outcomes. Now, I got really fascinated with this concept that I learned about in, there's a mentoring program for ministers, and there's a bunch of paperwork, lots of paperwork, and in there is this sheet of paper I mentioned one other time a few weeks back. There's a scale, and the scale says that there is a way to get from survival. I'm just changing it so that it works for you this way. Survival to stability to success to significance. And I thought, well, isn't that fascinating? Survival to stability to success to significance. And so I thought, I'm going to graft these two things together. I'm going to graft them together, and we're going to discover how to get from survival to stability to success to significance using the power of thought, the creative power of thought. So, here's what it says about how to do that in a nutshell. To move from survival to stability, we must change our habits. To move from stability to success, we must change our thinking. And to move from success to significance, we must change our priorities. Now, of course, every one of those terms has a certain definition for every one of us, depending on what we value and where we're at in our lives and what has meaning for us. So there's a lot of room here for what those are about. One thing that I discovered after I spent all week just weaving these things together, being so fascinated about them, I thought, I was going to go online and type in those words and find out who created this thing. And it turns out that it's a book by Zig Ziglar called Over the Top, How to Do Those Things. So a way to live over the top is to change our habits, change our thinking, and change our priorities. And that will take us from just getting by to really leaving a legacy by the time we're done. And enjoying our time here in a way that we can't when we're all about just getting by. Right? So now I have not read the book. And I don't know what Zig Ziglar suggests as to the details of taking these steps. I'm sure that the advice is fantastic. I remember when I first got introduced to this teaching, I used to live in Fort Lauderdale, and I would listen to the motivation station on the radio. Okay, Janet's nodding. There is, I don't know if it's still there. It was in the 80s. But it was an FM station, and it might have come out of the Center for Spiritual Living. But anyway, all of those motivational speakers were on it. And really what we do here is the same thing. We just call it by a different name because we're not doing this in the corporate world. We're doing it right here. So, if we need to change our habits, our thinking, and our priorities, and of course what we specialize here is the thinking part, then what we're going to do right now is spend a little time on each of those concepts and more time on the middle one, because that's our specialty. But first I want to say that there are things about habits that you may never have heard before unless you've read some of the teachings of the Science of Mind of Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes has very interesting things to say about habits. Now, immediately when we by the way, it's Zig Ziglar's fault that anybody in this room is saying you must or you should, right? Actually, Ziglar was saying must and Holmes was saying should. So it's their fault and I'm just the messenger. Okay, so habits. Habits are have a couple of qualities or characteristics. Number one, they're things that we do automatically, right? And in some cases, they serve us. For example, I taught myself to automatically put on my seatbelt before I turn on the ignition in my car. And that serves me. So it's just fine if I continue to do that unconsciously, as it were, because it is supporting me. But I wrote the program, and it's doing what I taught it to do. It's doing it for me. The same with how often I brush my teeth. I still need to work on the flossing part, but, okay. So anything that we choose to do regularly will become a habit. It can become a habit. Where it gets sticky is when we do things, and I haven't gotten to the Ernest Holmes part. This is my part. When we do things automatically that don't serve us, what they do, of course, is they produce outcomes, they produce results, and they get our attention, and then we're like, oh, I have a habit here. I have a habit of doing something that's not serving me. What to do then? Now, for some of us, we may find it more easy or more difficult to change a habit, and here's why I believe that's so. I know that when I went to a mechanic, I got the first brand new car that I paid for all myself. I drove 5 speeds all the way until the car I have now. This is the first time I've ever had an automatic transmission. And the mechanic said, if you want, you can keep replacing your clutch to the tune of, back in the 80s, it was only $300 and some odd dollars. And you can do that pretty regularly, or every time you come to a stop sign, to a complete stop, as you're anticipating that, you can put your car in neutral and let your brakes take a little bit of it, okay? Instead of downshifting and leaving it in gear and riding that first gear way, especially when I lived in Vermont, on the hills, that whole thing. So you can stop doing that, and you will buy fewer clutches. I learned by the next day. No problem. I had no investment in continuing that behavior. However, there are other things that I have known about. Some of them have to do with environmental practices. Some of them have to do with diet. Okay? Some of them have to do with other practices. And any time that I've been invited to learn a new behavior, to replace an old one, and it came up against something that I wasn't ready to let go of, I made a different choice. So about those, I will say that we have a group on Fridays at noon that discusses that. And we get together in other arenas to support one another around those things. Because what happens is we seek an answer, we get an answer, and then we're not ready to let go of this other thing, and then we have what's called a complex. And it will beautifully create conflict to get our attention until we resolve it. And that's also perfect. So, Ernest Holmes, when he writes about habits in that textbook, he says that actually habits are the objectification of a desire. They are some desire that we have, made manifest in tangible physical form. That habits are the outpicturing of something that we desire to experience in a way that we can experience them with our senses. And that behind all of those is an urge that we all have to express life. And behind all of that is Spirit's urge to express by means of us. So what can happen is that our habits can either be this clear and easy pathway of spiritual expression by means of us with total and complete cooperation and beautiful outcomes, or they can be the kind that end up not being life-affirming. They're destructive in some way because some part, we met a little obstruction in there. That's just an opportunity to grow. Those things always get our attention. They always tell us precisely what we get to look at and to heal, to bring into the light, bring into alignment with the truth of our being, so that we can live more that way. And then even the things that we do automatically will be in support of our lives, such as brushing our teeth and wearing our seatbelts. So, habits alone change our habits. The good news is that what I'm here to talk about today is not every habit in the world, not every one that we might be dancing with or choosing to address or change or establish or whatever. These habits are specifically the habits related to the creative power of thought. So you can breathe a big sigh of relief and say, oh goodness, thank goodness, we're just here to talk about my habits of thought. The good news is also that when we change our habits of thought, all of our other desires shift accordingly. And so the things that we were trying to wrestle with out there will automatically become easier to address because we've changed how we're coming from in here habitually. Okay, so that was how to get from survival to stability. Change your habits. The next one is how to get from stability to success. And that is changing our thinking. And that's where this teaching really comes in. And we talk about that every time we get together. Change your thinking, change your life. We even have t-shirts and bumper stickers that say that. Everybody, even people who don't come to these centers, know, change your thinking, change your life. There's more to it, though, than just running around and shouting affirmations in the wind. There's more to it than making some massive declaration that there is no sickness, there is no poverty in the world. There is this process of learning how to have total belief and conviction behind our words. There is this process of discovering and understanding how universal law works, so that when we speak our word, we know that we're calling upon the law of creation to make manifest according to that word. That's pretty powerful stuff. Is this something that you can learn by sitting in, this is usually like a 25-minute presentation, and then just go home and you're done? Not likely. But it will awaken the truth within you that resonates with that may have been asleep for a while, maybe needs some dusting off or a little clarification. But affirming isn't enough. A lot of people, if they don't get into the deeper part that is about how we have to really know and understand and embody this in order for it to work for us, we'll just say, oh, this stuff doesn't work. I can't use affirmations on this. This is bigger than that. Well, yeah, it's all bigger than affirmations. Affirmations, they're more than salt and pepper, but they're not the meat, okay? Because there's a formula that includes affirmation and so much more of identifying with all that is, our oneness with it, its presence within us, the creative power of our thought, our feeling, our word, engaging the creative process and literally creating something new as a result. Now, if you want to get really technical, everything already is. The gift has already been given. We're actually not creating, but what we are doing is making new patterns and making new forms, calling new forms into form by means of this mental blueprint, by means of this thing that we are doing. So, we said that thinking was the way that you get from stability to success. Thinking is the way that you get from stability to success. We just said that if we have habits that are not supporting us, we can create new habits which do support us. Might we create some new habits of thinking, perhaps? I don't know about you, but if you just think back over one day in the week, one day in your life, random sample, right? And just say, okay, now, if I can recall, what did I think today? Well, when you first got up, before you remembered who you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to show up or any of that, you might have had some very interesting random thoughts just come right to the surface. Perhaps if you ever get up in the middle of the night, now there's an interesting random sample of what's going on down in your subconscious. The thoughts that just, between when we get up in the morning and when we go to bed at night, I don't know what the count is. Some people have some idea, but we have a lot of thoughts. The thoughts while we're driving, in the car with the windows rolled up. I drive a car that has a license plate on the front of it that says think positive. It should say positively, but the person who created it didn't know that, and I just thought it's still beautiful, and I put it there, right? Okay, it says think positive. I ended up at an intersection where the person who was facing me, who had the right of way to make a right-hand turn at the green light, was just frozen. Yeah. And I've got traffic behind me, the light's going to change, everybody else is getting ready to do their thing. And this thing came up out of me. Yeah, I had my windows up. But I just yelled, and I took both of my hands off the wheel, and I said, go, just go! And it was just like monstrous. And that was inside of me. And when I was in danger, that's who came out. So, talk about unconscious habits. Well, I don't know. Maybe that was my ego doing a very good job of keeping me out of a car accident, and there's nothing to change. The point is that we have a lot of unsupervised thinking going on. I would encourage you to read the first 4 sections of the Science and Mind textbook, and the one that we're referring to today is about how to use it. And there are a couple of highlights in there because I couldn't possibly tell it to you all accurately, and you would miss something anyway. One of the interesting things is that there is no process of healing. This is what Ernest Holmes says. There is a process in healing. That process's length is dictated by the amount of time it takes for us to get from not knowing to knowing, from not believing to believing. The universe operates instantaneously. There is no time and space. It's beyond that. Time and space are a creation included in it, so we know where the heck we are at any given moment because we're operating in that realm. But the universe responds simultaneously, instantaneously. However, we have a process of healing, of demonstration that involves time and space. And the amount of these are dictated by how long it takes us to get to the point where we fully believe. Believe what? Believe in this thing that we are desiring. And again, just like I said earlier, this is more than just sprinkle some affirmations on it and go about your day. This is the opportunity to step onto a path of mastery. And mastery goes from mystery to mastery by taking the time to explore, to delve, to discover, to know, to understand, to practice, to know even more, to practice some more, until things click, until they make sense. And once they make sense, they work for us. We live in this world, but not of it. And yes, there are all kinds of appearances going on out there that would tell us we're going to hell in a handbasket or that we've already arrived. But what if, even if we're going off the proverbial cliff, and I'm thinking of a Gary Larson cartoon, I don't remember what that, it was like an institution of some sort going over a waterfall. Even if we are, do you want to be the one who's on the front edge saying, yup, we're going down? Or would you like to be running to the back saying, no, we still have an opportunity to see something different, to know something different? I remember sitting in a coffee house when I've shared this before. I don't know how old I was, but I was trying to figure out how old I would be in 2012 or 13. give or take, because of the book I was reading. And I figured it out, and I thought, whoa. Well, here we are. Here we are, right? Yeah. This is not hocus pocus. It's just not another, seminar to go to and get 9 steps or 12 steps or 3 steps or 4 ways or whatever. It's this idea that if you want to, you can step on a path to recognize that your thought is creative and that it is done unto you as you believe. And that word as means when and to the degree and the quality thereof and for the duration of your belief. And that as well as you believe. So whatever you call it, whether you call it heaven or hell, or whether you call it good or bad, it's all optional. It's all available to us as our experience. And the responsible party is not out there somewhere. The other thing about things and people and circumstances that are out there somewhere is that they are neither person, place, nor thing. Everything out there, even though you can detect it with your senses, because you can detect it with your senses, is an effect. Everything in the manifest universe, in our lives, in the body of our affairs, is an outcome. It started in the beginning, in mind, logos, with the word, in the beginning. It moves through the feeling and the emotional realm. It gets energy in motion to coalesce precisely around whatever pattern is created, whatever blueprint, whatever mold is created. And it fills or takes shape as that pattern and shows up in form. Neither person, place, nor thing, not having personality or power of its own, despite the fact that you can smell it, taste it, touch it, and so on, hear it. Those are still what we call effects. Those are still results. We have the opportunity to discover that we dwell at this point of causation. What Ernest Holmes says about our thinking, and remember, this is to get from stability to success in our lives. What Ernest Holmes says about our thinking is that we ought to be, he says should, be careful, essentially where we aim that thing, that loaded, magnificent weapon of the creative power of our thought, because it's directly connected to that which calls things into form and out of form. The substance of all life is constantly taking form and leaving form, taking form and leaving form. And our thinking and our feeling and our words, our believing, our expectancy are in agreement with that. And I mean in a co-creative relationship with it. So what happens when we discover how our thinking really works is that we discover life is not happening to us. Life is happening through us. There's a huge difference. To being a master victim, to be masterful at being overwhelmed, to be masterful at claiming apathy. Oh, have you ever done that? I know. I'll just convince myself I don't want that or need that or believe in it. And that way I can get around the whole issue and just say, no, not for me. But what if underneath all of that was buried a dream in that very area? What if you really wanted to be that person or do that thing or have that experience? But you talked yourself out of it because it was easier than believing. This is where the word mastery comes in. We couldn't possibly learn all of this in a half an hour together. That's why this center is here. That's why this center is here. We don't do the classic free event and then call you in for something you have to pay for a business. What we do is we show up and we give it away, and then we say, if you want to step on the path of mastery with us, we're on it. We're always on it. There's always more to discover, more to realize, and we do that together and all the other stuff that we do throughout the week. So there's one more step. there's one more step. We wanted to get from success to significance. And I believe that Zig Ziglar chose an S word just to make a pretty package of it. But if it were to say, what I want to do is I want to live full out. I want to live out loud. I want to live my dream. I want to take it off the shelf. I want to be, you know what? I wanted to be well known, but truly well known. So I thought, I will affirm that I am positively notorious. I will affirm that I am positively notorious because I wouldn't want any other kind of notoriety. So, to move from success to significance, to actually say, I'm at the time in my life where I want to know that I made a difference somehow. And I also want to know if I go tomorrow that I said yes to everything in me that wanted to happen. I said yes to everything in me that wanted to be embodied and expressed. I said yes to everything. And I didn't talk myself out of anything. That would be significance, wouldn't it? Well, according to Zig Ziglar, the way to move from success to significance is to change our priorities. And that's another word. It's like, oh no. I came into this room this morning and they said I got to change my habits, change my thinking, and change my priorities. Once again, this isn't all at once. The time frame is dictated individually by each of us. And priorities simply are a reflection of what we find meaning and value in. They're not the kind of, these kind of priorities. You should, how many of us have those dreams that somebody thought were foolish or ridiculous? And are we not in a stage in our lives where we get to say, I know better now? And we are probably being told by people, a third of our age that we should follow our dreams. Not just that Joseph Campbell follow your bliss, but the kid who hasn't learned not to yet is the best teacher of all. Changing our priorities would actually be to sit down and in some way honor ourselves enough to take the time and to say, what really matters to me? And then reorder the way that we approach life in such a way that we put what matters first. And we're no longer struggling with these things that are at cross purposes. One of the things that Ernest Holmes says about changing our priorities is that we must, or should, or must, meditate and treat daily. We all know what meditation is, and there are many different forms of it which are available for us to play with and practice and find what fits. But anyone who has ever expressed any plan for wholeness, health, well-being, success, mastery has suggested meditation. Simply put, this is how to drive the car of our mind. Think about it. If your thoughts are creative and you don't know how to keep your car from driving around all by itself wherever it wants to go, whenever it wants to go, then you're not in control. Because thoughts are creative, whether you're behind the wheel or not. Especially when they get going. When they get going and they have feelings and emotions and maybe some history to back it up, and pretty soon you think, well, this is just the way it is. And it's on autopilot. And it's a habit. Treatment is a 5-step process that we specialize in, that was created here, that we teach here, that unifies all that is with us. Actually, it already knows that. It unifies us with it, which is also already true. So what does it really do? It reminds us, we recognize that we are one with something so magnificent it has no limits. And after we do that, then we say our affirmation. We say all these magnificent things about what it is, and then we claim our oneness with it. And then we say our affirmation from a place of oneness with all that is. And we have a completely different experience. And there's nothing left to do but celebrate and say thank you and let it go. If you can imagine a wave, let's just imagine if a wave comes up onto the shore and a bit of water gets caught in the tidal pool away from the rest of the ocean. It doesn't have the same power as it does when it's connected with the whole ocean. And when we have those periods of separation, we forget what we're connected to. So if you were to be that little tidal pool and just pick yourself up and go back and recognize your oneness with all that is, you're essentially and elementally the same. And then you'd recognize all that power that is available to you, all that intelligence, all that love, all that substance, all that everything. And then say your affirmation. Would you not have a different outcome? That is a brief overview of treatment. When you hear the word treatment, that's spiritual mind treatment, that's affirmative prayer, that's the way we pray around here. And that's the kind of prayer you hear when we open and close and so on. So Ernest Holmes says, meditate and treat, pray affirmatively, daily. A couple other things that he also says. You do it until you get your results. No matter what. You do not stop until you have your demonstration. Otherwise, you'll be right back to this stuff doesn't work. Well, I said one affirmation about my knee, and I still have the same problem. I'm guilty of that, by the way. I get to choose to sit down and go further with the healing of my knee. And whenever I'm ready, I will. And until I'm ready, I probably won't. The time that it takes to achieve healing or demonstration is directly related to the time it takes for us and the effort to get to that place of believing. So, just to wrap it all up, we have the creative power of thought, and we have Zig Ziglar telling us that to move from survival to stability to success to significance, that what we need to do is change three things: our habits, our thinking, and our priorities. And Ernest Holmes is saying that those habits and those thoughts and those priorities can be life-affirming. And to the degree that we understand our oneness with all that is, everything else will happen with effortless ease. The saying that I quoted last week was that love points the way. Love will always give you the direction from within. And the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction, will make it possible. I invite you to just take those ideas in and go look up Ernest Holmes and Zig Ziglar. Put them together and see what you find. Thank you.